Welcome to Spirit Level, the podcast that explores spirit, mystery, inspiration, and the ancient arts of divination through the lens of modern living. I'm Fiongal.
And I'm Jamie.
And we're your hosts. In this podcast, we have a mix of guest speakers asking what spirituality means to them, talking heads between Jamie and me, our experiences, what's helped us along our path and what could inspire you, and maybe some meditations along the way. Hello!
Hi.
And welcome to the final episode of Spirit Level. It's not the final. It's the last one that we'll be recording for Series 1. And all going well, there will be a Series 2 coming out at some point in the near future. But yes, for this, we've had... Well, firstly, thank you all so much for listening in, tuning in. The feedback on this has been far and beyond and above anything that we'd anticipated. We kind of... Right, this is going to sound really arrogant. We kind of knew it was going to be great, but just because we had such a kind of strong impetus to do it, but we didn't realise quite how far-reaching it would be. We've had messages from people in Australia, from America, loads across England, Europe. So the response has been really, really incredible.
I know, it still blows my mind sometimes. I'm just chatting to somebody and they're like, oh, I love that last... Or like the guy that we get our edibles from. He's like, can I say that?
Well, you already have, it appears. By edibles, he means our diet pills. No, that's even worse.
Oh. Anyway, but it's just like the people that you don't expect that are listening to it. And it's just really, really lovely.
Yeah, we're like at parties and stuff.
Yeah,
and
people are just mentioning
I love the podcast and stuff. So,
and we've had so many people write in, both on Instagram and email us in with questions and feedback that we thought for this episode we were going to just honour that and we were going to answer more of these questions.
Totally. We need to come up with the sexy title at some point. So if anybody's got a good idea for what viewers' question time should be, let us know. Maybe we'll run a competition around that potentially. There might be prizes if somebody comes up with a really ingenious thing, because we'll probably make this a regular segment in Series 2. Talk about readers' questions, or viewers' questions, or listeners' questions. But we thought on this episode, we'll just dedicate the next kind of 45 minutes or so to all your brilliant questions. So hopefully some of these will resonate with some of the things that you kind of were thinking but didn't necessarily know that you wanted to know. And yeah, we'll try and be as open and honest as we possibly can be. And hopefully there'll be some few moments of illumination along the way. Jamie doesn't know what all these questions are going to be, so he might be put on the hot seat, and we'll try and spare his blushes. So, question number 1. When was your first sexual experience? No, I mean... I'm joking. So these ones were sent in via Instagram. We put up a story just as we were recording the last episode, and we got a flood of really great questions. So we're going to start with stuff these are mainly around readings. So when we give tarot, psychic readings and mediumship readings. So somebody wants to know, what do people come with you with? Uh-huh. Yes, I will rephrase that. I think they're basically when people come to the readings, why are they coming? Usually, what's the kind of common thing?
What are they coming with? What's their kind of... It can be one of a few things. Guidance on a particular situation of some sorts, clarification on a situation.
And what situations do they tend?
Relationships, work. I mean, usually it's either about it's a few things, right? It's career, it's family, it's personal relationships, or it's the bigger subject of purpose. What is my purpose? What am I here for? Am I doing the right thing? Should I be on this path?
Sometimes health.
Yeah.
Not slightly rarer, but
bit rarer, but yeah. And it is funny, isn't it? Because often on Thursday I had 3 readings, and we've talked about this before, but often Spirit will send you kind of a load of things that are all really, really similar. So I had a load of people coming that were all in the wellness space. So much so that by the third reading, I said to this woman, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to say what they're telling me, but I almost feel like I'm repeating myself from my last client. So if you're like, this is so wrong, please tell me. And I went off and it was so similar. And she's like, no, you're bang on, you're bang on. So again, that's a hard thing.
It's mind blowing, isn't it? It's like the time when we moved, the amount of clients I was getting that were moving.
Yes.
And when we got a dog, the amount of clients that I had, it was like, oh, have you got a dog? It's really odd how
Spirit
it
seems to send you things that you can almost relate to and understand.
Yeah, totally.
And the more you learn and the more readings you do and the more you expand your awareness, I suppose they might start sending you more challenging people.
Completely.
Because at the moment I tend to get a lot of young girls in wellness kind of wanting to know if they're doing the right thing. Are they going to monetize that? Or relationships. Am I with the right guy? Or sometimes there's a love triangle. They tend to be the...
Yeah, it's interesting because we tend to have like little niches, don't we? So like I love doing business, for instance, or anything about creativity. It doesn't mean I can't do the rest of the stuff,
No.
Absolutely. And health I particularly like doing. It is weird how you find the kind of the things that you really enjoy doing.
And I always thought I was gonna be more focused on health. But actually at the moment, and this is the thing where you can't choose, right? Because I can't choose what comes through, so I can only kind of go with what comes through. And right now, it tends to be more along the relationships or career, particularly people that are in careers like marketing, PR, things where they feel like they're in a mundane 9 to 5 and are stuck in an office job and are desperate to get out of that and create something for themselves.
Because I think it is like it tends to be the clarity, reassurance or
is good.
guidance.
Yeah.
I think the amount of people that have said to me, it's like, oh my God, it's so nice to hear reflected back to me everything that I've been thinking.
Yes.
And not just thinking I'm mad. Because they might have quite kind of bold ideas of suddenly changing career or moving country or leaving that relationship, and actually just have somebody reflect back saying, you'd be great at it. It's going to really be, it's going to take off or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
They're just, you can see the kind of the exhale of, oh, thank God. I was so worried that I was just kind of making in the slight world of make-believe. Sure. But it's really interesting what you're saying about you do get these little gluts of particular themes. And it is that thing of, oh my God, am I just rinsing and repeating here? Because I remember one of the key things that I was told, and it's always stuck with me when I'm doing readings, the beginning should be the same, the end should be the same, but nothing in the middle should. And the only exception to that, I think, is exactly what you've spoken about when you get these little runs of, and it's usually once you've mastered those runs, spirit go,
You'll move on.
Right, okay, now you're going to have your this as a block.
And it's so hard because you've got to really, really trust. Because I remember after doing these 3 readings, in the third reading, almost not saying what was coming through because I just thought, this can't be right. And this is where the problem comes in, isn't it, sometimes? Because if that happens and then you come out of spirit and you start getting into your own head, then you're off on the wrong foot, and then it's always going to be a absolute shit show.
And also what you were saying in terms of, you just have to say what you see.
Yes.
And the times that you don't say it, and then later they go, oh, I think I'm moving to America, and you're like, yourself. Shit,
yeah, that happens all the time.
And it always looks really eggy, doesn't it, afterwards, where you're like, I knew that was, and they're kind of like, oh, I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
But it does happen. And I think it is that thing often in my readings, I know when I'm really bang on, the weirder, like the more obscure stuff is, I'm like, oh, this is so random, it must be true.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the other thing, just as the other section, of course, is that people often come when they're wanting to connect with loved ones. So they want somebody to come through, that have passed particularly. And we get a lot of phone calls from people. Actually, I haven't told you, we had a few phone calls this week from people that have recently lost somebody and asking the question, how soon is it, when is it too soon to have a reading to try and connect with a loved one? So I know we're slightly jumping and this wasn't going to be a planned question, but I've just remembered we had 2 phone calls this week about that. And, ultimately part of this work is that we are able to connect with spirit and hopefully give people reassurance that there is a life after death and that the people that have passed are in a better place. So my answer was, I said it's a really hard thing to answer because it's all so different and also individual. From what I gather, for example, having a reading 2 weeks after somebody have passed, it doesn't feel quite long enough for them to almost settle in this new space.
And actually that applies to anything really. Like I think if you've broken up with somebody and it's 2 weeks later, I always see it as almost like a bit of a whirlwind. Until that whirlwind has settled, then we can kind of look at things objectively and go, okay, that's over there, that makes sense there. Because all that's going to happen is if you're coming in the heightened emotion of that, that's what we'll pick up on.
Exactly.
And it's quite difficult to see through that wind, so to speak, that gale.
Yeah.
It's interesting you asked that question because I asked this of my guides because somebody asked me how long to wait. And the answer that came back was 3 months. And I checked this with Gary, our tutor, our mentor, amazing mentor.
I said actually to her in the end, usually we say between 3 and 6 months is what I probably have heard that said, but I said at the same time, don't let that put you off coming because it may be that you'll come and it might be that there'll be other insights, there'll be other things. It might not be that you connect with the person you want, but without a shadow of a doubt, it will be useful in some way. So I said, really, it's down to you.
Yeah, because even if you're in the whirlwind of that situation and you come and then we go, it's a whirlwind of a situation, sometimes that reassurance of,
exactly,
I'm not just being oversensitive or I'm not just kind of...
So I kind of said, book in and see. If it doesn't go where you want to, leave it a few more months and then maybe come back to it.
Totally. Great answer and great question. What do people come with? I'm just thinking if I can add anything else, but not really. But one thing I would say is, and I say this at the beginning of all my readings, there's no such thing as a stupid question and there's no such thing as an unenlightened question. So, sometimes I've been asked perhaps what I perceive as quite a mundane question, but actually for somebody else, that's actually really important. And our job is never to judge. We're not here to judge on anything. We say it's this really odd thing. Is one of the benefits of having read for a long time is you learn to become a lot less. You never judge a book by the cover.
No,
because sometimes people come in and you realize their inner world is so rich and deep, or people are kind of completely contradictory, not contradict, but in contrast to what you'd expected.
Yes.
So please never feel like when you're coming to a sitting, is this a silly thing? Is it an obvious thing? They must think they get asked this all the time. It really doesn't matter. As long as we say you come out with clarity, reassurance, or guidance.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. The thing that I always ask at the end of my readings, did that help? I don't care about, I care about the accuracy to some degree. It's got to make sense to a sitter. But as long as they say, yes, that did help, then big tick.
Often people will like to unpick it a little bit at the end, won't they? And give you the feedback of, you were so right on this and this has been going on. And then you do learn a little bit afterwards about their life. And you're like, actually, that was pretty good. Or sometimes not. Sometimes they don't. They just get up and say, thank you so much, which can be quite... both ways is odd because the first way you kind of like, I kind of don't want to know too much. Even at the end, I feel a bit weird about knowing. I try and change the subject a little bit.
Oh, do you?
Well, I just feel like, what if they come back? Often they'll say, I can't wait to come back. I'm going to be back in 3 months' time. And
it's funny, actually,
I don't want all of that.
You sometimes struggle with the return client, don't you? And it is a bit of a... I remember when we were training, our tutor would often get us to sit with the same person twice in a row, twice in 2 weeks, for that very reason, because you think, oh my God, what am I going to say? But then, as he always says, and as I always say, you've got a whole life of sitting in front of you.
It's got easier recently. I think the more I've been doing it, it has got easier. I'm letting go of that kind of fear of that. But yeah, certainly at the beginning, I just thought, I've already read for you last week. What else am I going to say?
It's that thing what people always assume that reading for complete strangers would be the hardest, but it's often the easiest.
So much easier. I'm yet to read for somebody. I suppose I've read for people on retreat that I know reasonably well, but I haven't read professionally yet for somebody that I know really well. And I am quite nervous about that.
That's hard.
And people are, it must be so much easier. Like you said, it's the exact opposite. It's much better having a blank canvas because then you know that you're only working with spirit. So much harder than if you're sat with somebody to not go into advice mode because of how you know their situation. And I'm still yet to figure that out, I think.
I'm just thinking, like, if I give you a reading and it's like, you dress up spirit-led messages in inverted commas just as a kind of mode. The amount of and I'm not knocking them. This sounds really misogynistic, and I promise you it isn't. But the amount of women I get, and I'm talking about their relationship and some of the frustrations they're having in a relationship, and they are nodding and they feel really kind of reassured, and then they want to send in their respective partners so that I can tell them what to do, basically, or tell them off, or go buck up your ideas. It's quite funny how that sometimes like, oh, could you sit for my partner? And it's like, suddenly,
well, we don't read for each other, do I think in all the time we've been together, I think you've given me, I think we had one reading right when we first met. You read for me once. Yeah. And then we do
spirit reading after
a spirit reading, perhaps, where you drew my 2 spirit guides. And then recently we've started this tradition, haven't we? You and I and another friend of ours, where we do our year ahead readings. So we'll pull 2 lots of tarot cards and we'll speak about that. But other than that, it's so hard to, it's almost...
It's funny because I like reading for my mum. I've read for my mum, I think 3 or 4 times. Yes. And actually the insights with some of that was quite amazing because there was stuff that I discovered about her that I didn't know until the readings. And I've read for my sister, and again, that was a really good reading. But yeah, on good friends, I do sometimes.
Could you read for me, do you think, and keep it quite impartial?
Absolutely not.
It's hard.
I could read for you, and then probably, but yeah, the impartial bit, I think I would struggle on. I think I would insert my own secret wants and desires. Do more washing up would probably be on top of the list. Okay, so next question. Well, there's actually question 2 and question 3, and I'm going to kind of link these questions. We'll mention this at the end as well, but just because we're closing this series, don't feel that you can't send in questions. We will bank them for next series. So please either drop us an email at hello@wellnessfoundry.co.uk, or you can drop us a DM on our Instagram page at Wellness Foundry. So second question that links with the third, so I'll give them both. Somebody was asking, have we ever had any negative experiences in readings? Mm-hmm. And slightly linked, how do you tell someone something bad's going to happen?
Ooh. I remember sitting in front of a guy. I think I was in practice.
Studying, yeah.
Studying, yeah. But the energy shifted quite dramatically, and everything became very just heavier. And I got this sense that perhaps.
Do I know this?
I think so, maybe. But perhaps there was like a darker entity, or perhaps there was, not that this person was dark, but almost like there was an energy that was attached to this that was almost perhaps not coming with the best intentions. Mm-hmm. And it was a really difficult thing to maneuver, because you've still got to try and deliver a message with compassion and in a way that's not making this person scared and worried. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, right, what's this about and why is this here? And is this something that they are actually creating themselves a little bit, that they're bringing in? Or is this,
Yeah, sorry, I was slightly internally laughing. Not what you were saying, because it's absolutely bang on, and I've had a similar experience. And there is tact, isn't there, of kind of, I think what you've said there is really, really important. It's like, there is absolutely no use of us saying something to somebody and then worrying. Like, no. I've always got to check in with myself with a difficult message of like, is this just going to leave them in a place of worry? And I always say, if we're going to talk about anything that's perhaps challenging or difficult, the emphasis will always be on, well, how do you overcome that? Yeah. So we'll never say, oh, you're going to break up with your boyfriend. I've had clients come to me and say, oh, I saw a reader and they said, oh, you're going to break up with your boyfriend. And I was like, well, that just becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I would tend to do is, okay, there's a challenging time coming up within this relationship, and this is the best way to circumnavigate that, and X, Y, Z. But the reason I was slightly internally laughing is because I sat in this course. I won't even say what the course was, because I try and leave out all identifying factors, but a very respected person in their field. And we were in a group, there's probably about 12 people in the room. and she pointed at somebody and said, "You've got an entity attached to you. I'm not going to sort it out for you. You're not allowed back until you sort it out." And I was like, oh my God. Well, I suppose that's one way of handling that situation. I mean, she was right, but I don't know if the rule that I always abide by is honesty without compassion is just brutality.
Yeah.
So you always have to bring a compassionate edge. So how did you, in this kind of situation with this kind of entity, sorry, I kind of slightly cut you off.
No, it's fine. I can't remember. I think perhaps even the tutor came in and said, "Oh yeah, we've had this before," kind of thing, and helped us, because it was a bit of a. I think there was a few of us reading, so it was easier in a way because it was a bit more of a group dynamic, so we could all kind of pitch in and see, and everybody agreed. So I was on the right track, absolutely. And then I realised also it was something that the sitter was aware of as well, and it was something they were trying to work on in terms of how to kind of part with this thing. And when the tutor came in, it was like, oh yeah, we know about this.
Okay.
So it was
That's
fine.
quite reassuring.
Yeah, it was good. Well, that was really early on for me as well. So it was I was like, I didn't know what was going on.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because I think this is part and parcel of why, and this will lead into a later question, but a lot of people have quite initial fear about working in this sphere. Like, they're starting to open up psychically, but they feel that it's in control of them and they're not in control of it. And they feel a kind of presence, or they'll feel their guides coming in and they're like, oh, what is this? And and I've never had that. I've never, in all the time, and I've had some really extreme experiences. Like, I've been pinned to the floor for hours at particular times, and I've seen kind of dark entities in readings and all of that stuff. And there's only one time I was ever genuinely scared. I will talk about that in a moment. That will be a visit to Crazyland. We went there last week, but we'll take a little whistle-stop tour around Crazyland. But I think this is the thing, like, I've never been fearful of something. What's also interesting, like, I have had a few readings where I've seen lots and lots of black, but actually I've looked in it emotionally and it was quite exciting and kind of interesting, and this thing of mystery and allure. So a lot of people that are shamans tend to have a lot of black around them. So it isn't always a bad thing at all. But it's interesting because I think I've only seen an entity with somebody twice, I think. And one time, yeah, she kind of came in and I thought, ooh, what's that? That shouldn't be there. But I have done probably getting close to 1,000 readings, I would say, something like that. And in all of that time, I've only seen something like that. And again, there is a kind of certain language, and you can go, oh, have you considered a healing? And I know somebody really good. And you say it quite very kind of tactfully and gently, but that's the only time but also it's weirdly kind of co-created. They don't tend to come in just unwilling, completely unbeknownst to the person. And we've spoken a lot about that in our protection episode.
Yes, it's why it's so important, right, to have this spiritual hygiene. If you're going into this work, it's not something to just mess around with. It might look as though it's all kind of fun and games, but actually you don't want something to come in that then is around you and you can't get rid of so easily.
Totally.
And we have clients, don't we, that get in touch in house clearings and things because there's just all sorts of crazy things going on. A friend of mine lives in an old church, and there's just constant people around, and they won't leave, and it's hard. So you don't want to be creating that yourself if it's there already, and it's.
And most of these things are just managed by boundaries, as we've kind of spoken about before. But I just want to really, really assure, because it's a very common misconception. It's something that a lot of people say to me as soon as they sit down. Please don't tell me anything bad.
Yeah.
And this is why I love the tarot. Is it doesn't necessarily shy away from those challenges. It does have the Devil card. It does have the Ten of Swords. It does have the Tower. But that doesn't mean that it's quote unquote bad at all. It points towards something is out of alignment. Something needs to be addressed. Something isn't perhaps aligned with your moral code or your ethical code. So it's never, as we say, a good reader should never worry. They should never plant those seeds of doubt. You can sometimes say, right, this is the challenge, this is the tough point, but if you do it this, then it will be probably the best way to circumnavigate. And actually, sometimes I've had people sit in front of me and I say, oh, it feels like I'm lost at sea and the sea is kind of throwing waves around and I feel quite overwhelmed. And actually, that can be a reassurance for somebody. It's like, again, oh, I'm being seen. There's no point somebody sitting in front of me going, oh, they're showing me daisies and sunshine and moonbeams and everything feels great, because they'd come away going, well, they haven't assessed my situation properly at all.
Yeah.
But we would we'd never kind of go, that in the extremes, oh, this person's going to die. I mean, I have heard it. I've heard, and it's such awful practice, awful ethics. So I would...
Well, there's just no point telling somebody that, is there? No. And it is funny that people are, particularly around tarot, really fearful of it. It's got this reputation, hasn't it, that you're going to be told something bad. And we have to do that a lot. We have to kind of manage that a lot and let people know that all of our team, all of the readers are well, and this is why it's important to be trained. As we've talked about before, it's not just about delivering messages. It's about handling the situation, how you do it. People potentially will take this, what you say.
We can literally change the course of somebody's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, I know this is the thing.
And this is the problem.
A lot of people just assume it's like this kind of fluffy, kind of silly, as you were saying, playful and fun. No, we really understand the responsibility of what we're doing. The sad thing is it's just not a regulated area because it's not recognised as a real thing.
No.
So it's why it can't be regulated. But there is some awful practice out there. So just, go with people that are recommended and you trust and have kind of good reviews. Basically us. So the other thing I wanted to tell you about is the only other time that I've genuinely been scared in a reading. I hope you've got your ticket for a visit to Crazyland. This is probably about the bizarrest thing that's ever happened to me. And I don't often say this to many people, so I've decided to broadcast it out to the world in a podcast. But I once had a client and I was giving a message about this pool, of this like very black pool with these stars in it. I thought this is a very strange message, but I was like... And the client, who shall remain nameless, said, oh, that's interesting because I was doing a meditation where I went into this pool of water that I was describing bizarrely, and it suddenly turned into a snake. And I was tuning into this energy and kind of describing it. And then this snake started coming, because this was via Zoom, started coming out of the screen into my living room, or our living room.
I remember this.
We used to live in London, South London. And it wasn't just like a little piddly garden snake. No, this was like, if you've seen Harry Potter and the basilisk from Harry Potter, it's kind of that size. Absolutely enormous. Enormous. And it just came through the computer screen and started coiling itself round in our living room.
Oh God.
And this snake, the instant it started coming through, I was like, oh, this really... oh, shit. It's the only time in any reading I've gone, shit. And I knew in my heart of hearts, if I started talking to that snake, it would basically go, I promise you anything. I can make you rich. I can make you famous. I can get you the perfect house. I can give you whatever you want. But I knew, obviously, that would come at a cost.
What was that? Was it the devil or something?
No, it wasn't the devil, but it wanted to make a kind of devil-like bargain with me. And I just said, I'm not even going to look at you. I'm not even going to converse with you. I'm going to completely ignore that you're there.
And get back in the computer screen.
And it just sat in the living room. And at that moment, Archangel Michael came down and stood sentry right next to me. I don't really work with angels that much. So it was a very unusual thing for me. And this giant angel just standing there watching this ruddy snake. Because I knew this snake was old. It was something that Archangel Michael knew about. He'd kind of seen him before. And that snake remained in our living room for about 2 hours. I just had to completely ignore it. It finally got the message and just buggered off. But it just, and the whole time Archangel Michael was standing there. So that's the only time. And I spoke to my tutor about it, saying, this odd thing happened. And he kind of tuned in and went, yeah, I think you had one of the last of the Titans, which predates the gods. So I looked it up, did a bit of Google research, and there is one of the Titans that was this giant snake.
And why was it with the client then? What was the?
Well,
was there an attachment there?
Yes, that was. I can't really say too much about it without kind of revealing anything about them, but they were effectively dabbling in things they oughtn't.
Right.
Not entirely consciously. It was a bit more subconsciously, but yes, I think they were willing to make some more bargains. This is not a standalone kind of... There are certain things that we don't talk about as readers, not because we're kind of sugarcoating kind of quote-unquote bad things. Some of the things that we do experience, see, and hear through the grapevine are... They do require a heightened... sense of imagination and trust, let's say. There's some stuff that I know if I said to people, they would look at me like I'm absolutely crackers. I mean, the snake story is probably kind of quite out there, but I've heard stuff that's even more bizarre. But that's the oddest experience I've had firsthand. But yet it tends to be, most of the time, bad things in quote unquote difficult situations, that we're not entirely powerless within the situation, let's say. So we often focus on, right, how can we best navigate those situations? Good question. Fabulous question. These are great. I like these.
Looking to deepen your spiritual practice and holistic well-being? Then we have the answer. Here at the Wellness Foundry, we run spiritual retreats throughout the year in both the UK and abroad with an emphasis on luxury, community, and spirituality. Expect a soul-enriching blend of yoga, profound intuitive teachings, delicious food, all within an idyllic setting. Use code PODCAST5 at checkout and enjoy 5% off your booking. For more information and bookings, visit the website wellnessfoundry.co.uk/retreats or find out more on our Instagram @wellnessfoundry. Terms and conditions apply.
So, next question. Do you have to be a believer to have a sitting? So I suppose they're asking, do you have to kind of believe in spirit and psychic and all?
I mean, ultimately, no, I guess you don't. It's much nicer for everyone involved if you come with a kind of openness and a willingness rather than sitting there with your arms crossed, being a bit like, go on then, give me what you've got, which occasionally does happen. But you don't have to believe. I mean, you can sit there in silence and let the reader kind of talk for an hour non-stop. But we always say, I don't know the rest of the team do, but I always say, I will probably go off at the beginning and talk quite a lot. Feel free to interject if you have a question as we go along, or we can leave that till the end. But don't feel like you have to just sit there in silence with me just talking at you. Occasionally for you to chip in and say something is fine. It's not like you have to give away a whole scenario at all, but just sometimes even a voice. I find when you hear their voice and they're talking, it helps with that, because we're however this is working, however this connection is working, sometimes the vibration of the voice.
You mean the sitter's voice?
The sitter's voice talking will just help you go in a little bit deeper. I find if they're completely silent and don't speak whatsoever and just nod, it's much harder. It's not that I need them to give me answers. I just need to
maintain the connection. There's sometimes why in readings I go, oh, it's quite cloudy outside, isn't it? Just for them to go, yes, it is. Or whatever, exactly. It's just to kind of maintain that.
Because people often ask, don't they, this was jumping the gun, but another question is it as strong having a reading on Zoom as it is in person? And it's that thing again. We don't work in these normal realms that we're used to, so it makes absolutely no difference.
Yeah, time and space doesn't exist.
Exactly,
they're man-made concepts.
So it's like, but to hear the voice, whether that's on Zoom or in person, the voice carries a certain energy, a certain, or a name even. Just knowing a name sometimes. I had a lady the other name that had quite a powerful name for me, and I started off the reading with that because I just got this impression that there was a reason why that name was important.
Actually. That's interesting. Throughout the reading, I'll repeat the client's name through just to maintain.
Just keeping that thread, isn't it?
I've not thought that I'd do that. I always say it's a little bit like being at a party. So if you meet somebody at a party and they, as you say, got their arms crossed and they kind of grunt answers to you, it's just not going to be a pleasant exchange. You're just going to think like, oh, right, well, I'll go off over there. And, over time, my tutor always said to me, you're very good at maintaining a boundary, aren't you, Fingal? Because I will not shy away from saying, excuse me, do you want to be a part of this, please? I can sometimes get a bit pointed with people because I'm just not... thankfully, I've been doing enough readings now where I now no longer feel as though I need to prove the work to people. Obviously, I've got to prove it in terms of I've got to be accurate. I'm going to make sure, one of the things, the rules, golden rules that we live by is make sure that the sitter knows you're talking about them and only them, that it's not just some kind of generic kind of message. But yeah, as soon as people you can tell almost instinctively those people that just go, right, show me how good you are. Yeah. And it's horrid, horrid energy. And I often, actually going back to a certain client I remember one time she came, it wasn't so much about her not being a believer, but she had such a wall up, like such an energetic wall. Yeah. And I said, look, I'm really sorry, I can't, until you bring that wall down, this ain't going to work. And then she spoke very, very briefly about why that wall was there. And I was like, fine, great, now it's down. Now we can begin. And we started.
That's good. That must take some practice and some courage, because I've had a couple of clients like that and I've just struggled my way through the reading, knowing that they're not going to be happy. I wasn't happy, but I didn't quite have that confidence yet or know what to do to say, can you meet me halfway here? Like, totally. Because it's not fair. It's like, why should, it just felt like all eyes on you. Prove it to me. I'm not going to say a word. And if you're not right, I'm just going to be like grunt. And it's horrible. And why should I sit through that?
Completely. I'd rather say somebody, oh, this isn't working, I'll give you a refund.
Yeah. And maybe the more I do, I'll get more confident with that. And luckily, we don't get many people like that. No. Usually it's fine. Because let's be honest, people generally that come are coming because they must believe in some way. Otherwise, they just wouldn't be coming unless they've been bought it as a gift or a present. That can be sometimes a little more challenging. I think
there are sometimes, as you said, like those people that come and they haven't had a reading with you before, but they maybe have had other readings and they don't trust you yet. Yes. You do have to earn people's trust.
No, but I'm talking about people that just don't believe in it whatsoever, in the work whatsoever.
My favourite people are the ones that don't believe when they come in and they
leave going, oh my God.
Totally because most of the time, this isn't a dogmatic thing, so people shouldn't believe. They should remain skeptic until they've experienced it themselves. That's absolutely fine. Skepticism is healthy. Yeah. Cynicism isn't. Yeah. There is that thing of, and some people, they come with their arms crossed, but it's actually, cynicism is great and fine and all of that stuff. But sometimes that disbelief is coming from a place of fear. And actually for them to reprogram their way of looking at this thing and accepting would require such an adjustment on the way that they look at so much. It is asking a lot from people sometimes to make that kind of giant leap. So I do get it in that way. So it's okay to be kind of skeptical, but it's not okay to be this kind of slightly confrontational energy. It's just not, that's never pleasant, regardless
whatever
of the
you're
situation.
Doing, it's just rude. You just shouldn't come like you should. You're paying to see somebody that you think is a professional at what they do.
Yeah, and we are only human. You know, we will occasionally get things wrong. We will slip up. We'll misinterpret what spirit are telling us. But
although it's just making me think of one time I had a massage. And this was the time I did speak up and get really funny because the therapist was like with her elbow just rubbing up and down over my spine. And I was like, that's my spine. Like you massage either side of the spine. Don't go over it. Like, please.
And
like,
this goes back to what we were saying before. If we're damaging, if we're being wantonly, cruel, or we're handling the situation badly, then
you have to say something.
Yes, you have absolute license.
But up until that point, it was a pretty unpleasant massage, but she wasn't hurting me, so I just kind of grimaced with my face down in the gap of the bed.
And also in our readings, we'll always say to people, you have absolute license to say, I don't want to, can we move on from this? I don't want to, can you stop? Yeah. We will always make sure that you feel empowered in a reading. Yeah. that you should never feel as though you're just having things launched at you and you've got no say in it. Absolutely not. There's many times when I know that I'm dealing with quite a sensitive issue, and I will check in with people and say, "Are you all right? Are you okay for me to carry on? Are you happy with this?" I wouldn't just kind of, "Oh, get over it, launch." No. Not at all. Okay, next question.
Mm-hmm.
I love this question. This is such a brilliant question. How far do you see into the future?
I always say in my readings, I struggle with timeframes. I feel like I can give an estimate of a time frame, but generally,
I see what you're saying.
Time, when people say how far can you see, or I don't really know. Like, I could say, well, I could ask and they could say within the next year, definitely before summer next year, if they're asking for a specific timeline on something.
Yeah.
But in terms of how far do you see into the future, I don't, time again is a weird one with it.
Yeah, you're so right. Sometimes my guides are pretty specific and say within 4 weeks that it might have happened, or but it is always dependent on, I always say right at the beginning of my readings, I don't work as a fortune teller, I don't work in definites, but I work in opportunities, possibilities, and probabilities that lay in front of you.
Yeah.
So there's no point me saying, oh, it looks like you're going to move within the next 3 months, and then you do absolutely zilch about it. And then you come back and say, you said I was going to move in 3 months and it didn't happen. It's like, well, you didn't put your house on the market. You didn't look on Rightmove.
Yeah.
What did you expect? So it is about how much you action. So that's often why things can be brought forward or pushed back. Because you are, as we well know, have free will within your life and free agency. So that's why timelines can be a bit squiggly. And there's so many variables and so many different things going on. But occasionally, my guides can be really by this date, by this is going to happen.
Because I can sometimes be talking about a subject, like a big subject, say like a period of real mental health struggles or something and then they say to me, well, to be honest, you're talking about me, but that was a year ago.
Yes.
And I'm always like, oh, I'm sorry. It's just, for some reason, it's still in your energy.
Totally.
So it is what's coming forward.
Totally.
And it's hard in those instances because then they feel a bit disheartened because they're like, oh, I thought I'd kind of work through this. And then I do struggle sometimes with where to go with that, but it's just what...
Yeah, I think it is just exactly, you say, it's still in your energy. It might not be as resolved as you would perhaps wishfully think it is. Actually, there's still some remnants of that still need to be processed or integrated.
If it's been a prolonged period of something, or if you for example, I danced for 20 years professionally. So 99% of the time when I have readings, someone will always get something in terms of performing arts, dancer or something, because it's so in my energy field still that it's just, it's there, right?
Totally. For me, the answer to that question of how far can we see into the future is, it's interesting when we come to readings because we don't dictate. A lot of the times, again, people just assume that readings are about fortune telling, and they're absolutely not. Sometimes in my readings, I work, just as you say, lots of things on the past and lots of things that are still resolving or playing out or retrospectively. Sometimes I get clients who are in the winter season of their life, and it will be a lot about, the kind of thinking back to the good times, or this slight kind of, this sounds a bit...
What does winter season of their life mean? Oh, the older people.
Yes.
Oh, what a lovely way to put
nice?
The elderly into a bracket in their winter season.
The winter season.
Never heard that before.
I suppose you're in the autumn season.
Great.
No, you're still in the sunshine, my darling.
I mean, in my head, I'm still prepubescent.
Still spring in your mind. It's with some people that are kind of older, it will be a lot of kind of, it sounds a bit glib or a bit saccharine or a bit dismissive. I don't mean it in this way at all, but it will be a trip down memory lane. It will just be like, this wonderful thing. And, your father's talking about the time that you did this together. And it's just, it's a lovely kind of reassurance for them in that way. Then sometimes it's a lot to do with the present, actually. I think more, the readings tend to skew more to what's going on right in the now. Here and now rather than what's coming up next.
Agreed.
And, okay, perhaps there's this adjustment. Okay, you're feeling like this and this is what you can do about it. But we do, sometimes in my readings, I jump really far ahead. I could go into 20 years into the future. I don't think I've ever seen anybody's kind of real end of life stuff. I don't think it's kind of not relevant, but it's kind of, I don't know. I don't feel that it's germane.
I tend to see, I often see if there's a woman coming to me of a certain age that I often can see how many children might be in their future. So I say, I'm definitely seeing a boy and a girl. If that's something you want to do, it's absolutely an option. Yeah. Sometimes it may be that, okay, it might not come to you in the most conventional way. I had a lady the other day, which again is a difficult message to convey. And not that I think you've got any, and it wasn't that there was any fertility issues. It was almost like circumstance outside, almost this other partner that still wasn't there that was coming in. May rather go down the route of adoption or something. It was interesting, and it was having to unpick that in a way that was, again, considered and considerate, and not to say something that somebody might freak out about because, oh my God, I want to birth a child
sometimes
naturally.
A tightrope, some of these messages, an absolute tightrope. But this thing about it really is up to spirit whether they do past, present, and future. And my interpretation has been that when they're talking very much about the future, it's because they need to offer a certain degree of reassurance for people, or an inspiration of this is what you could achieve. These are the great things that can happen. So it's almost, I describe it as a bit of a lighthouse, as a guiding light, or a kind of pole star of kind of reset your navigation of, these are the things that I could achieve in the long term. So it's never really up to us. And sometimes people say, well, what will that look like in the future? And I have to say, I'm sorry, I don't know. They're not giving me that because you need to resolve. Sometimes I describe it as a bit like being on a hill, and it depends where you're positioned on the hill. If you're going uphill, you can only see what's at the top. So only once you're at the top, you can see a kind of all around you, and then you can see where that might lead. So it really depends where you are on that journey. It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, very good. Do love an analogy.
I do love a good analogy. It's because it's the psychic language, basically.
What's next?
So next, this is a long episode, isn't it? But I think it's a good one. We might have to.
Yeah. If there's one or two more questions,
I think there's three more. Okay. It's fine. So this should be a quick one. It's a question I get asked all the time. I'll walk into a bar. I'll walk into a party. I'll walk into a room, and somebody will say to me, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm a psychic and a tarot reader." And they'll say, "Can you guess what?
What can you tell me about me now?"
Yeah, basically it's, are you picking something up on me now? Yeah, that's always a question that
and what do you say? I never mix my spirits.
Boom, boom, ching. Yeah, but it's true. It is partly true. The short answer is no. Because we're off the clock. The way that I always say, and again, I love an analogy, is my taxi light is off and I am not picking up any rides anymore. So I am here to enjoy people's company. I'm here to be fully present. I'm here to be kind of grounded and kind of very aware of my energies. I'm not going to be wide open and then feel completely overwhelmed and completely just kind of inundated with all this information coming through. That's how I used to be.
Yeah. And that's how that is the other issue, isn't it? If there are people going around saying they are open psychic, can give a message at the drop of a hat, they're not having this correct kind of spiritual hygiene and these boundaries that we're taught to have, again, because you should be able to, in a way, switch it on and off, and not, if you are constantly in that way. I mean, it's exhausting as it is doing readings. Say you do 3 readings, one after the other. If you were constantly having that intuitive hit, picking up on every single person you looked at,
you'd be screwed.
It would be too much.
You'd be absolutely
So
wiped.
you do have to choose. So when you're at a party or at a dinner, it's the last thing on my mind.
Totally. It's a bit difficult when you're on a date, though. Thankfully, we don't have to date anymore because we're happily married. But when you're on a date, you do kind of start having a little bit of a subconscious poke around of like mother issues. Oh God, right? Oh, they've got that going on. It's a bit, it's a difficult one to shut down. But no, you're completely right. To put it into context, I can do about 4 hours straight reading, and that's it. I can do 4 readings in a day.
Yeah,
that's my kind of top limit.
Yeah.
So imagine if I was trying to do that all the time, I'd just be
too much.
Yeah. So a lot of the time when people are starting out, if this is happening to you and you feel really open and you're receiving all this information from people, just close down. Just use this intention of drawing your energy back in, whatever that means to you. Do a bit of grounding, draw your energy back in, and just say, right, I'm going to close that down. You can just say it out loud or whatever. That will help kind of circumnavigate that feeling. Okay, so we've got, these are now in email questions that we've received. So this is from Rick. Hi, Rick. So Rick is asking, I used to astral project, and I'm wondering if you have any insights on the subject. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is also, do you know if birthmarks or any current body markings or wounds are from past lives? Fascinating question. So maybe we take part A first.
So funny enough, I have a feeling I did used to astral project when I was younger. In that kind of dream state, or just before you sleep, or maybe just before you wake up, maybe in that
liminal space.
That liminal space of sleep, I think is where it would tend to happen. But having that feeling of being very stuck to wherever I was laying, not being able to move in one way, but at the same time, almost looking down and seeing my body being stuck there. And almost saying to myself, get up, you've got to get up for whatever reason.
How old were you?
This used to happen all the time. I don't know, in my maybe early teens or something. And it was really, really, really unpleasant because it was this feeling of...
Well, it sounds like sleep paralysis.
Yes. So is that the same thing, or is it different?
Well, yes and no, because there's an important distinction that you said within there. So basically, astral projection, for those that are like, what are they talking about? We've got 7 layers of the body. So we've got the physical body, mental body, emotional body, astral body, and all of those. And it's through the astral body that we're able to... Basically, it's just to say it crudely, and it's not quite this, it's a bit more nuanced than this. You've got the physical body and the energetic body. And astral projection is when your energetic body leaves your physical body. So your consciousness stays intact, all of your energy, your nadis, your chi, your life force, your prana stays intact, but you are outside of the physical body. So this is often when people have out-of-body experiences, or they... a lot of people, when they have near-death experiences, say exactly what you say. They leave their body and they can see their body. They're like floating at the top of the hospital room and they can see themselves below. So this is what astral projection is. So yes, it is. But I think the distinction between what you're saying is it's partly sleep paralysis, because astral projection, when done correctly, is done consciously. You decide to leave your body. You do it a lot when you sleep. A lot. So often when we kind of feel as though, usually when we've had really crappy sleep is often a sign that we've done a lot of astral projection. Because we'll to my gatekeeper, I sometimes say at night, keep me in my body because I really want a good night's sleep. I don't want to kind of go off to the moon and visit. So we can use it as intention of, right, spirit guides, helpers, angels, keep me in my body so I can sleep restfully and be restored for in the morning. That's a kind of affirmation you can say. But yeah, it's any time that you kind of leave your body. I used to do it as a kid as well. I used to lie there and try and astral project and kind of leave my body. And it's interesting because I remember being in class with training, and I used to do it all the time when I first had my spiritual and psychic awakening. I'd be there and just collapse and just kind of faint on the spot. And this was because my energetic body was leaving my physical body, and it was a lot to do with my lack of grounding. But I remember doing it in class once. I was sitting in front of somebody and started reading for them, and I just fainted. I just collapsed, and the tutor ran over and kind of picked me up and pressed his elbow on my shoulder and kind of put me back in my body. And he says, I've never seen anybody leave their body so quickly, like just completely just out. But it's also something that they use, and it sounds really mad, but they use in the military as well. So this isn't all woo-woo. There's actually training in this so that they can do remote viewing, where you can use your energetic body to go and look at a bunker in South Sudan or whatever. So you can actually kind of go and it's often how they look, you can look at spaces as well through the projection of your eyes. So your consciousness can go, because as we well know, time and space doesn't exist. Your consciousness can go somewhere else, still retrieve all the information and then come back. So we're able to go into somebody's living room or go somewhere completely the other side of the world and see things.
Well, it's like saints or yogis that do that, where they sit in meditation and yet they are seen in 4 different places.
Bilocate,
It's crazy. So in a way, what happened was maybe a mixture then, was it?
Yes.
Because it definitely felt like there was an element of being outside of my body because of being able to see it. But mine was in that kind of sleepish state as well. But it was definitely this feeling of also being pinned down at the same time. So it's odd.
To me, the interpretation of that, because again, I've had those experiences of being pinned down, definitely, and maybe that's in part spirit, but also in part of because you no longer have physical control, or you don't have control over your physical body anymore because you've left it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember just saying to myself, come on, you've got to get out of this, like, and really trying to will myself to be almost back in my body because I didn't like it. I didn't like that feeling.
And again, that's often because you felt out of control. And the important thing about astral projection when done correctly is that you are able to kind of make that as a conscious choice, that you kind of leave and then come back in, leave and then come back in. But again, it's not an area that I'm an expert in at all. It's not. I've kind of only learnt it by proxy. It's not something that I've necessarily done myself, but it is something that I want to explore some more of. So in terms of the second part of the question, in terms of birthmarks and things like that, so it's interesting because in a mythological sense, it said that the gods wanted to make sure that humankind didn't become too beautiful, so they gave us all of these birthmarks and these kind of imperfections and these blemishes in order to kind of keep us humble, so to speak. But interestingly enough, in the kind of and also in medieval times, it was a sign that the devil had entered the body, which is kind of cheery, isn't it? But then in French Renaissance time, you had a mouche, which was a little beauty spot, which was a little fly. And again, it was seen as the kind of height of beauty, and you could get these mouches in different kind of shapes and forms and heart shapes on your cheek and all of that stuff. So it's interesting that they've kind of gone in and out for these things. But yeah, absolutely. I would say that, because I think birthmarks appear in about, if I remember correctly, about 10% of the population or something like that.
And in terms of it being linked to a past life, in some of my past life regressions, that is absolutely come through, because it's like, I suppose markings slightly different, but for example, somebody came through that walked with a slightly turned in left foot.
Oh, I remember you saying this, yes.
In their current life, and then it transpires in their, which I hadn't noticed, but it transpires in their past life that they'd had an accident on the left side of the body that had left them kind of with this slight deformed foot. And that was just like, wow. And so that had carried through, that there was this.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's not something that I've come across before. I've got to be honest. It's not something that I can go instantly, oh, yes, I've read that, or I've experienced that or seen that. So, but it's an interesting theory, because we don't know what causes birthmarks. It's a bit of an unknown in science. Some people think it's hereditary, some people... But I do like this idea that it's almost karmic. It's something that's carried through. I think that's really interesting, because I've got a birthmark at the base of my spine. So I'll have a tune in, and I'll have an ask of my guides at some point, and I may I'll get back to you all about it. Okay, so it's been a long podcast today, so thank you for sticking with us. Definitely, this is the last question that we'll kind of cover. And it's actually it's something that was sent in by a few people. There's Robin, there's Michelle as well, and Helen. One of them was from Indiana. So hello to you across the pond in Indiana. But basically, I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to kind of read out your messages in detail. But basically, the question that each of them ask in a slightly different way is, how do I cultivate my intuition more? Are there courses to try? How did you find your tribe? basically I have gifts and I want to know how to develop them. And Robin in particular says that she has ADHD and C-PTSD. And often when she is developing these gifts or tuning into these gifts, she can sometimes feel as though she's losing her mind a bit. Again, it kind of points a little bit towards what we were saying before about it is very common to feel as though it's controlling you and you're not controlling it. What I would say is this is first and foremost why we set up the Wellness Foundry, because when I was having my psychic and spiritual awakening, I did think for about 2 years, am I going mad? And even when we met, I remember there were certain experiences like me not being able to go on the underground for about a year and all of this and finding it so overwhelming, and these moments where I'd be pinned to the floor and all of this stuff, thinking, oh my God, this is it, I'm going mad. And the reason that I set up the Wellness Foundry was to be part of the solution to that. Because I thought, well, I can't be the only one that's experiencing life like this. I can't be the only one that is having these overwhelming feelings, but I don't know where to go. So I was like, right, I'm going to set up an institution that is part of that solution. So we do run courses. We run them usually about twice a year. So depending on when you're listening, the next round of courses starts in October, mid-October. But again, we always put them on the website and the newsletters. So if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, go visit the website and do so. And we run them, as I say, in person in our London studio, but we also run them on Zoom to accommodate an international client base. And within that, we really put an emphasis on safe practice. So we give you the tools and techniques to not feel this sense of overwhelm and not feel as though, oh my God, I'm going mad. And actually part and parcel of being in a community is about being with like-minded people and kind of sharing those experiences and going, oh, I've had that too, and oh, it's so reassuring to hear somebody else explain these kind of things, and actually being given those, as I say, that language, that toolkit, that reassurance of no, this is perfectly normal, this is a good thing, this is a gift, and this is how you craft and cultivate it kind of carefully. So we do that as a foundation course, which again is the kind of introduction and the toolkits and the grounding and protection and working with your guides. And then there is a rolling course, and then moves on to the intermediate class where you start doing kind of more one-to-one sittings for other people. But it's not just a psychic development course, it's also a self-development course. So it's amazing. It's really supportive. And a lot of people go, oh, am I going to be good enough? Have I got the gifts? Am I just imagining this? Or am I going to be out of my depth? Are other people going to be better than me? And I just want to say, if you feel that you have any sort of gift or any sort of intuition that you want to cultivate and develop, get in touch and join the course.
And I think the way that it's so lovely how you say about it being a self-development, because ultimately,
yes.
If we strip it all back, all of this stuff is just about self-development as well, and intuition ties in with self-development. Yes. So even if you're not, it's just such a good thing to do.
It's not about, I have to be a psychic. No, it's not like, yes, we're going to be working with intuition, so there needs to be a certain leaning towards that.
Yeah.
But yes, it's not about, I'm training to be a psychic. Think of it as more as, I'm learning how to integrate these parts of myself for greater happiness, basically.
Yeah. And it's a subject, isn't it, that, we don't get taught at school. We don't learn about ourselves. We don't learn how to navigate difficult situations. And ultimately in this work, that's what we're doing. So it's almost like it should be an A-level course after you finish school, and how to navigate life through your own
and
intuition.
The problem is, so many times you go to other people, and this was my experience, you go to people and say, I'm experiencing this, or I'm having these visions, or I'm hearing these voices and all of that stuff. And people can look at you like you're totally mad, or you fear being judged, or you fear that you're kind of, you're going to be ostracized or ridiculed in any sort of way. And the great thing about these tribes and these communities is it's a really safe space to share these experiences. And as I say, have people kind of look at you and go, oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, visit the website. At the moment, it's under experiences. That might very well change, and we might change the title to courses. But if you do have a little bit of a hunt on the website, and as I say, either drop us an email or sign up to the newsletter, and you'll stay up to date with all of those. So again, a huge thank you. I'm going to pull a card in a moment, but a huge thank you to all of the amazing questions. Thank you for staying to the end. I know this is a slightly longer episode, but we wanted to really address such brilliant questions. If you've got any ideas on what the course, this section should be called for future episodes, do let us know as well. And I think from up until me, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing this journey with me, and kind of it's been great. It's been so nice, and as we said, we've discovered so much about each other, and it has been fun. Like, we set this out to be fun. I know the setup's been a bit of a pig, but actually once we get chatting, I have loved it, I've got to say.
Good.
Deep and profound as ever.
Pull your card. Okay. You've talked enough.
Fair enough. Okay, so the card that I have pulled is the Hangman in reverse. So the Hanged Man, again, is often a sign of people going, oh gosh, should I be worried? It has quite a scary title. But the Hangman is usually always about a change of perspective. It's about seeing things in a different way. And I'm going to keep this really short and sweet. I really hope that we've been able to bring you a change of perspective and to be able to look at things in a different way. And I hope that something within this has been enlightening and reassuring. And just as we were talking about there at the beginning of like, what do people come to us for readings? We also want to do that in the podcast. So we hope that this has been reassuring, brought some clarity and some guidance.
Amazing. Thank you, Fingal.
Love you lots.
Thanks for listening, everyone. See you soon.
And that's the end of this week's episode. We'd love to hear what you think or suggestions on what you'd like us to cover for the future. Either leave us a comment if the platform you're listening to allows it, or drop us an email, hello@wellnessfoundry.co.uk, or a DM on Instagram. Be sure to hit subscribe or follow to stay up to date with the latest releases. But until next time, love and blessings.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Spirit Level, brought to you by the Wellness Foundry, the home of spiritual wellness. For more information and bookings, visit the website wellnessfoundry.co.uk or find us on Instagram @wellnessfoundry. Don't forget, as a thank you for listening, receive 5% off your first booking by using code PODCAST5 at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.